The way I got the job was because I'd written a novelization of a movie for Canon Books. Tom Dupree was my editor, and he said, look, I got this deal. I got a movie novelization that I got to get in a hurry. I need it fast. He was asking me a favor. And I said, well, what's the project? So it's The Mask, Jim Carrey. So I did it fast. In fact, I think it was one of the fastest novelizations I'd ever done. It took like 18 days or something like that. And so I got it done. And he said, okay, I owe you one. What he gave me was Star Wars Shadows of the Empire.
And they called and said, come on to the ranch. This was back when they were still at the ranch. And we'll have a discussion. And what we did was I went into a room with 15 or 20 other people sitting around a great big table. They showed me the promo they had made, which was cut from bits and pieces of other movies. And they had a couple of characters and a general idea of they wanted to do a story set in a kind of an edgier, darker universe than sort of the Star Wars underground, basically the mafia in the Star Wars universe. And we sat and took notes, and we went around the table because it was a multimedia project, and so the games guy said, okay, we need this. The computer games guy said, okay, I want to have a scene with the sky cycles and motorcycles, we got to have that, so I'm taking notes. And the comic book people said, we want to have this character.
We want the Mandalorian. We want to have Boba Fett. And so, yeah, I can understand why. Sure, so I basically been right about Boba Fett because I knew the comic book people were going to do it. I didn't really have anything to do with the games. It was all mine was the writing stuff. And so I talked to the people at Dark Horse who were working on the project, and I just basically said, well, you got a question, run it past me, and I'll compare it to what I'm doing in the book, and we won't get crosswise. They had Shizor as the villain. Now, Lucy Wilson came up with the name Shizor because it's sort of loosely based on, I guess she had a boyfriend at one point who was Portuguese. And so the pronunciation of that XI is SH. And so they had the villain. We knew what he looked like. They had some of the ships already laid out, but there really was no story. We sort of knew vaguely who these people were and of course, the existing character.
And any movie without Han Solo in it it's not going to be as good as it could be because he's a rogue. He's an interesting character. They wouldn't let us. We couldn't use him because he was frozen. He was in carbonite. But we could come up with basically Han Solo's younger, cockier brother, and that's who Dash Rendar was.
Dash Rendar basically is the stand-in for Han Solo.
When I got done, everybody was pretty much happy with what they put in. I went home and wrote a big fat outline and sent it back in, and after it was approved, they went through and looked at all the different stuff. That was the basis for everything else that came.
I had a fan send me a note saying, I've been keeping track of all this stuff. I know where all the planets are and how many people were there and what was done. Would you be interested in reading it? And I said, oh, yes. And so he sent me a copy of the thing, the ASCII file. That's how long ago it was. And I read this thing. I thought, this is wonderful. So I called up Lucasfilm, Lucy Wilson, and the crew that I was working with there. And I said, you need to read this because this guy's got all this. And they did. And they read it and they bought it. And it became the basis for their Star Wars, map, basically, of where the planets were and all. You could just make stuff up because you didn't have to know anything. You didn't have to. Well, I'll just make up a new system. I don't have to worry about something that's already out there and screwing it up. You write something and it becomes part of the canon. And before Disney took it over, canon was different. And so they said, no, you can't do this because somebody in one of the books said this, and we're stuck with it. So okay, fine, I can understand that that's what it is. As writers came along, as the series progressed, as the books came along, we were all given a CD, which was basically a compendium of everything that we knew about Star Wars that we could use and what we couldn't use. And you had to use that as the background. They call it the holocron.
So if you had any questions about anything in Star Wars, you just call up Leland Chee. He knew.
Leland Chee was my continuity guy. He knew all the stuff about that. And so if I had a question, there was a problem, if I wrote something down, Leland would catch it. And he would come back and say, okay, here's the problem. Okay, good. I can do that. I can fix it. I'm not going to mess up anything.
But the fact is that, Lucas creates this great toy and lets us play with it. And, of course, there's some strictures. There's some things you can't do. That's the questions that any fan would ask when you're watching a movie. What are you thinking? What's going on in your head? Why are you doing this stuff? And I got to answer those questions. And it's like, how cool is that?